Hello, and welcome to Survival of the Thickest, the podcast which survived the beast from the east. But you'd know that because that was 3 weeks ago by the time this podcast comes out.
With any luck, it would be less snowy and less horrible.
I have hated the snow, to be fair. But
I remember the childish joy we used to get from playing in the snow and making obscene snowmen.
Oh yeah, of famous historical characters.
To be fair, it was sort of in what I was about to say in good taste. It was in incredibly poor taste.
Yeah,
but
definitely weren't condoning his actions.
No, but I mean, we were young, and we just thought it would be funny to really bash up a Hitler snowman.
Yep. Well, thinking of bashing up things, what have we bashed out today, Cam?
Oh my god. Yeah, fair warning, we're exhausted recording this because we've just spent the best part of today recording the podcast section of my dissertation. Obviously, we've mentioned this a few episodes ago. It's been a bit of a build-up, but unfortunately, I can't release that onto this channel straight away.
No.
But it does exist. You will get the content soon. It's going to be quite different.
Yeah.
We hope you'll like the sort of
style,
what we've gone for. But
it's very serious, isn't it?
Yeah, it just needs.
I think there's maybe.
Well, I mean, at the end of the day,
jokes.
it is about
climate.
It is a substantial part of my degree. So
yeah, well, we've got to take
it was
seriously.
important that we take
I quite enjoyed
seriously.
it though. I mean, I can tell what kind of strains it's had because you sat here with a beer in your hand.
Yeah,
I think it was the first podcast we've done with you having a beer. So.
And it was a necessary evil because it has been a long day, to say the least.
Yeah, I quite enjoyed it. It was nice to do something a little bit different. But
I mean, you certainly get the impression with these normal podcasts that we like to ramble. We like to just chat.
Yeah.
Whereas this one was heavily edited.
Every was taken out, you know.
And we're keeping that in because we don't care.
So anyway, what I thought we'd have a quick chat about today is one of my modules. Surprisingly, we do biology at Keele University.
They gotta test you in some way, don't they? It's only right. You can't just pitch up and drink.
Get a 2-1. So the module is called Current Topics in Biology, and it's actually a new module, and you can kind of tell it's a new module. Everything's been a little bit iffy in recent weeks, but what I do quite like is basically how it works is, so 1 week they bring someone in, the following week you have a group discussion about what the person had to say, and then you're given a question, or you can go away and make your own question up about the topic and write a small 500-word summary of the literature.
Well, 500 words is glorious. You're getting credits for that. You're getting recognition.
I am getting actual credits.
500 words.
I had to do 3 of them.
Beautiful.
But, you know.
Beautiful.
So I thought we'd just have a chat about some of the topics that we talked about and see if you had anything to say.
I'm a man with opinions. I can help you out.
Excellent. So the first current topic in biology was based on the topic of sustainable pharmaceutical drug development.
See, whenever you mention sort of sustainable, I get excited.
Yeah.
You know this is my field.
You do like a good sustainable thing.
But then you talked about pharmaceuticals and I realised I really don't care.
Well, you're going to learn today. So my question, or my discussion point was, are pharmaceutical companies doing enough to tackle the problems caused by drug pollution?
Ooh, okay.
My kind of article starts off with explaining how there is a thing called the Responsible Care Initiative, which has been set up by different chemistry associations, and it basically tackles the issues of keeping in drug production environmentally sustainable. And the 3 areas include pre-manufacturing, manufacturing, and then the product use. And my point of view was talking about how I think that what happens after drugs has been used, what they go in the water system and that kind of thing, isn't seen as a big enough issue in society.
Oh yeah, so are you talking about how you might be having an antibiotic or whatever, and as it washes through the sort of sewage system, you know, not to be too blunt about it, but once it's made its way through, it's going to go directly back into sewage drains and back into rivers
Yeah, pretty much along those lines. Basically, the amount of pharmacy and personal cosmetic products, but I focused specifically on the pharmacy part.
Yeah, of course. No, because in my that's sort of what I was thinking of.
Yeah.
Because the better example of what I'm talking about is if you're using like a face wash or a shampoo or something.
He's picked up on one of my paragraphs before I've even mentioned it. Basically, I like you said, is that I made a good comparison between. But if you're arguing about whether or not companies are responsible for what happens after their drugs are used, are companies responsible for personal hygiene, etc. products after they've been used? Well, recently that's been concluded that the answer is yes, they are.
Oh, good. That's nice.
Yeah, so I'm guessing you were going to talk about microbeads, if that's what I was going to talk about anyway.
Not necessarily.
Oh, okay.
To be honest, microbeads, yeah, they are a problem. But what springs to mind for me is that they can often have certain metal components, like ionic metal components that when they enter the water supply, they can cause acidity.
Yeah.
Which is
obviously
not good for fishers and other such wildlife.
Yeah. So my example of a drug was actually synthetic estrogen. That if you're on the pill, you'd be a big fan of that. Basically, it turns the fish into hermaphrodites.
I do vaguely have knowledge of this.
Giving them basically male sex reversal. They make your balls bigger. They make your swimmers swim less.
Your fish balls.
Well, gonad size, it said, so...
Oh, okay, all right.
I was kind of being a bit of a metaphor. I wasn't being that pedantic.
I was going to say, I thought you were being literal, and I was like...
It makes the swimmers swim less, if you know what I mean.
I see, right.
So
so it skews the sort of sexual
drive of a fish. I don't know male or female, but it just doesn't go well with them.
Right.
And my comparison was about how as recently as this year, I believe it was in January,
as opposed to February or December,
other months. Companies... Oh, sorry, let me get this correct. Basically, it's been decided by the world that microbeads are bad because fishes eat them and then they go a bit loopy. And major companies L'Oreal and Johnson & Johnson have committed to plans to remove the beads from their product production.
Good. Well, I know for a fact that my family has used them in the past.
Really? Your family? Your mum's usually pretty good with this kind of thing.
Well, yeah, but you know, it only reaches a sort of public consciousness. But when it does, she's on the ball.
Oh, okay. That was it. All the face scrubs in the bin.
Well, no. What I did notice was that it sort of goes from tend to use charcoal now, actually, like charcoal beads.
Do they dissolve a bit better?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Well, my argument was about how a lot of action has been taken about these microbeads, and perhaps because microbeads are obviously visible compared to, drugs in water, dissolved, maybe that's why there's been a bit of an issue made about it. However, the European Commission actually, they have put together an action plan about it, and the US government held a National Drug Take-Back Day, which sounds like one of those uni programs they try and push through at the SU. Oh, guys, it's National Drug Take-Back Day. Bring in your weed. You don't need it. But no, it's not. It's actually to do with prescription drugs. Apparently last year they collected... sorry, not last year. In October... October last year. They collected 456 tons of drugs across the US, which is quite a lot. And all that is now not in landfill or flushed into the loo.
That's real good.
So I like that. And finally, I looked at what happens to the drugs that are in the water already. We've looked at stopping them getting in there. What happens to the drugs that are in there? Well, a Portuguese company, bunch of researchers, have demonstrated that an artificial modified clay called LECA, light expanded clay aggregate, can significantly reduce concentrations of ibuprofen and other common drugs from the water.
I assume that's because it's sort of collating all the molecules.
Yeah. But I thought that was good. Well done for them. And my final point was about the idea of let's say that you've got a high concentration of antibiotics in the water. What happens then when a bacteria becomes resistant to those antibiotics?
It's going to happen. It's going to happen.
And then what you've got there, not only have you got a super mutant strain of bacteria that can wipe out the Earth, but they're also already in the water supply.
In the water supply, or they can be taken up into a fish diet. They can build up in the food chain.
And then you eat the fish, and then you get
ill.
So there you go. That was that one.
Mm.
I thought I didn't really know much about pharmaceutical production, so I enjoyed that one. Now the next topic you said that you quite liked when I mentioned it to you earlier, which was a bit of aquaculture.
Yep.
Now I actually had no idea what this was until someone told it to me when I had to do this project. So, why don't you tell us what aquaculture is?
You know what? Actually, I'm looking at your notes now. It's not what I thought it would be.
What did you think it was then?
In my head, I was thinking that it was those, I believe the word is hydroponic plants, where you have these vertical farms, right? You can just stack a farm, essentially, and stick it in a building, and all they need is water. Like, there's no soil involved. You just grow them in the water and, spray in the right amount of stuff that they need. And in theory, it uses up far less space than a farm does.
Well, you know what? That actually sounds interesting. We can come back to that one day. But that isn't... I mean, it's not far off. I mean, aquaculture is defined as any farming in water. So I guess that kind of counts. Well done. But I looked specifically at fish aquaculture.
All right. Okay.
Also known as mariculture, which is like, marine
fishing. As opposed to Maori culture, the culture of the Maori tribe.
Yeah, we don't grow those anymore. It was deemed unethical in the 50s. So, anyway, it involves the production of fish. There you go. Obviously, in large tanks of separated parts of bodies of water. So, have you ever seen those big metal rings on the surface of lakes? Lots of them.
Yeah.
And then that's basically they just chuck a load of fish in there.
Yeah. Fatten up the salmon. Yeah.
Yeah, well, the topic was the good, the bad, and the ugly of fish aquaculture, and
right. Well, you've got the ones that are packed in really tight. They're your battery farm salmons.
Yeah,
and then
very
you've got
much
some.
so.
Again, then you've got your free range salmons.
Yeah, just the salmon in the wild? They're pretty free range, aren't they?
Well, yeah, but you could say that about a chicken.
Yeah, but true, but a chicken wouldn't survive on its own in the wild, would it?
No,
it would be eaten by the fox. Anyway, so basically, the good parts. What are the good parts about aquaculture? Can you give me one, Cameron? Have a think. Use your brain.
Well, there's more food.
Well done. Yes, absolutely. So the global population continues to rise.
Don't you patronise me? It's been a bloody long day.
At an unprecedented rate. So basically, it's feeding lots of people, which is good. But why is it better than trawler fishing, for example?
Why is it better than trawler fishing?
Give me an example.
Well, trawler fishing literally just scrapes up the entire seabed. You're destroying a habitat. Thing with trawler fishing is you're grabbing everything and anything as well. So protected species, they're taken. Mm-hmm. Juvenile fishes, before they reach sexual maturity, they're taken out. So you can't reimburse the population.
Yep.
Turtles are caught up in it. That's not good. Dolphins as well. You don't want to eat them.
No,
tastes horrible.
Unless you're Asian, probably. I don't know. I'm pretty sure people eat dolphins somewhere. Anyway,
somewhere in the world, someone will eat everything. Yeah. Not one individual, but
yeah. So that was definitely the major pro. I said that, like you say, you're not just throwing back half the stuff that's dead back into the sea. Can you think of any disadvantages to aquaculture?
Well, they're not being brought up in their natural habitat.
True, but then neither are most farm animals. I'm thinking more specifically about the actual process of farming fish.
Is it they can't grow as big?
Well, if you think a farm is very much think of a pig farm, muddy field, right? Basically, all the field has been destroyed by the pigs. It works very much the same because the fish in aquaculture live in natural bodies of water. And what you do, you chuck fish food in a very confined area, you chuck it in antibiotics.
You churn it all right up.
Yeah, and then all the fish, they're pooping, and all the poop goes everywhere. You know, and especially if you're using fish that aren't naturally from that lake, for example, or, you know, you're gonna naturally contaminate slowly the body of water. Yeah. So that was that.
Yeah, it doesn't sound ideal.
No.
So what's the ugly?
The ugly. Well, I think that was I think they were just kind of going for
the salmon themselves. They're not pretty fish.
Do you not like pink, orange-ish? I don't know.
I thought that was like the funny misconception. Is
No.
that they're not actually pink on the inside.
Are they not?
I don't know. I might be making that up now. Who knows?
Someone put in the comments whether or not a salmon is pink or orange.
Whether it's like naturally
pink.
the
Naturally
flesh.
Pink. I think it's probably orange. Anyway, so that's that. I'll talk about a couple of success stories in South Africa. You do a pretty good accent on that.
That's not South African.
Oh, I don't know.
Just don't like.
Don't try.
Don't try. Don't try. Don't fail.
That's
my motto.
They produced 1,500 tons of fish a year, and they're not grown like out in the lake. They actually pump seawater on land and then grow the fish. So the fish are kind of naturally growing, but it's just controlled. And the good thing is, you know, you've got economical benefits there as well. You've got people that who don't necessarily own a boat to go out to sea, but they can stand around a big pond and hook fish out of it.
To be fair, I've done something very similar. It was this lovely little trout farm in the south of France. Yeah, it was really nice. Like, it was all local. They just give you not a fishing rod, but a stick with some wire on it with a hook, and you just add a little bit of bait. And of course, there's so many in there. You know,
gagging for some
it's
bait.
It's not even fishing. It's just
hook a duck, hook a fish.
Exactly.
You get a prize every time, pretty much.
I mean, admittedly, I was too young to experience the gutting.
Oh, nice.
but
the actual part of farming we all really need to know about.
I mean, I know about it. Doesn't mean I want to see it.
True. That's very true, actually.
I'm fine with not seeing it, and I'm also fine with eating it. Like, some would call that a double standard, but, you know, go away.
And my kind of concluding comments were based on the idea of the best thing about aquaculture is it allows for much greater control over the fish that we're farming, obviously.
Yeah, you don't have to go to any lengths to get them.
Yep. However, to really make the use of this future of fish farming, we must make sure that we can use that control wisely. Because, you know, otherwise, if we get too carried away, we can cause damage to the environment.
Well, it's doing it in the wrong areas as well, because like I've heard a lot of shrimp farming is done in areas of mangroves,
right?
And mangroves are like really valuable ecological sites because they're just perfect for a lot of things to live. So if you start sort of hijacking that really interesting rare system to farm, it's I guess it's the problem with all farming is that you're shifting something out.
So, but do you have to do it for the sake of humans, or is that a bit greedy of us?
Well, yeah.
So my final topic, we got introduced to an animal conservationist from Dudley Zoo, I believe, which is near Birmingham, I think.
Yeah, sounds about right.
And he was talking about conservation, obviously. And my kind of specific area that I looked into was how the ethics behind keeping a distressed, endangered animal in captivity. So my question was, or my idea was, should you keep an animal that's obviously not suited to zoos at all in captivity if it's for the sake of the species?
No animal is suited to being in a zoo.
Well, no, of course not. Yeah, but like some animals do better than others. Like pandas don't do very well, do they? They're frigid anyway, but you put them in a zoo and I believe it's like 24 hours there in heat or something like that in a whole year. So,
right.
But you know, some animals don't do too badly, do they? And even you know, the very good zoos out there.
The seals have got fish on tap.
Yeah. Probably for all the aquaculture. But my idea was specifically about endangered animals. That if you didn't keep them in captivity, would they just die out? Should you keep them in captivity?
Well, it's the in situ, ex situ conservation argument, isn't it?
Very true.
I feel that, like, we can probably, with the technology we have, we can closely monitor individual animals in their own habitat, and I think that's probably the best way forward.
Yeah. Well, I quoted the words of PETA, our favourite animal rights organisation.
Well, I mean, they're not doing a bad thing. They just
Well,
again, it's like vegans. They can just be a bit
OTT.
full on and sort of
Well, I thought PETA would want every species to survive, but apparently they described these as pitiful prisoners, bored, cramped, lonely, deprived animals of all control over their lives.
I mean, you can certainly see their point.
Yeah, but I mean,
they're not
I think
exclusively.
it's a very narrow-minded view on it.
Yeah, no, they're not exclusively tourist attractions.
I mean, one of the things that I agree with them, or agree with other animal rights groups recently, has been the captive
Sorry,
breed.
you don't want to come out in over support of PETA. You're just like all conservation groups in general.
Well, I wouldn't describe PETA as a conservation group. I'd describe them as a bit of a bunch of loony animal huggers. But anyway, one of the things that I do agree with them with, however, is the captive breeding of orcas at SeaWorld. I know it's been...
Oh, that's horrible. Yeah.
That's been quite a big thing recently. And I didn't realise, but the company has ended their breeding program in 2016, which is good. However, what if orcas couldn't survive in the wild? That was kind of my thinking. Would it be worth keeping them in tanks even if they weren't happy?
If they couldn't,
if orcas would not survive, if orcas would go extinct in the next 50 years without any human intervention, would you put them back in the sea?
God.
So I talked about primates because they're quite a good example because they're very closely. We are primates basically. I thought let's compare ourselves. So 60% of primate species are threatened with extinction, which I didn't realise. That's quite a lot. 60%.
Yeah.
And it's also a lot of the great apes as well. So a study in 2007 showed that at least 7 primate species from a variety of zoos, I think it was across the UK, had exerted what they call self-injurious behaviour. So
what are they
basically
doing?
scratching, pulling their hair out, stuff like that.
Bashing their heads on the
However, granted, this particular study said the incidence was low enough for it not to be considered a problem, if you know what I mean. But it had...
What? So it wasn't statistically
relevant.
above sort of
a percent.
Right, okay.
I can't remember, but nevertheless, it still happened. And I said that, however, behavioural changes obviously are quite easy to look at. You know, you're watching the monkey hit its head on the wall.
Just by observation.
But what about hormonal changes? And I had a lot of other studies that were showing links between human interaction and cortisol levels. Cortisol obviously being the stress drug. And cortisol has been linked to the actions that we just previously mentioned, the self-injurious behaviour.
Do you know how they're measuring the cortisol, though?
Because I have no idea.
Right,
I only had
because I was
going to
say, because if they... That's fair, but, that may be a result of, if they have to take a blood sample or something to measure the cortisol.
True. Yeah.
That in itself is a stressful situation.
But then you've got to argue that's human interaction. So
but that's not the interaction that they're sort of referring to.
And then my last point, I managed to feature a very famous friend of mine.
A famous friend?
Well, a famous person who we've all admired. It was Harambe the gorilla.
See, obviously the internet's got strong opinions on Harambe.
If you don't know who Harambe was...
But I don't know if we should publicly come out and say...
Harambe supporters. No,
Yeah.
I'm not.
I wouldn't support anyone or anything that would, injure a child.
Well, anyway, Harambe was the gorilla who was shot when a child fell into his enclosure because his parents weren't watching.
Where was it?
It was Cincinnati Zoo. And I was kind of talking about how no matter how well you make an enclosure that suits an animal, at the end of the day, a zoo would not be a zoo without people looking at the animal.
Mm-hmm.
And there has been links to show that high density crowds do lead to aggression caused in animals.
Quite understandably, yeah.
And I thought perhaps there's no doubt really that aggression was caused Harambe's aggression with a child was caused by the thousands, well not thousands obviously, hundreds maybe, of screaming visitors.
Exactly. No, the more it's people rush in as soon as someone's fallen in. Yeah.
So I don't know. I just thought that was a sad example.
But you can't hold
every
you
animal
can't
in
hold
every zoo
Harambe accountable.
No, I just thought that was
sort
an
of acting
example.
as it would naturally.
Well, no, but it wouldn't naturally though, would it? Because all those people were there.
No, as in naturally in that situation. Obviously, that's not a natural situation, but that is its natural response to the situation.
Yeah, of course. But you've got to argue that the Harambe would still be alive if there wasn't all the extra, the crowd and all that with it, because there were examples of gorillas, of children falling in gorilla enclosures before, and gorillas being quite tame with them. I can't remember exactly the name of the gorilla, but it did happen that a child fell into a gorilla enclosure, and a lady gorilla actually picked the child up and carried it out of the enclosure.
Wow.
I can't remember the name. It did happen though.
That's real science. Just trust me.
Trust me. I only had 500 words. I couldn't write every one in.
That's fair.
But my final point was how of the 10 mammals that were listed as that would not be able to survive without a zoo, basically, 5 of them were primate species, and I thought that was quite a lot. So I copped out with a cliche answer, which was, is this a case of the needs of the many outweigh the needs of the few? Because, is it worth keeping 1 or 2 animals in captivity, who aren't necessarily where they should be in their natural habitat, but you have guaranteed species security? There you go. What do you think? Put it in the comments below.
If
you want to. I'll tell you what though, we've done 28 minutes there.
You know what's beautiful about that is obviously what we've been doing all day. We've been desperately trying to get the minute count as low as possible, and it's still not as low as low as ideal, and yet I'm just rambling on. Yeah. I'm watching the minute counter come up, and I know it doesn't matter at all.
No.
God, that's a relief.
Well, I enjoyed that. I just wanted to hear your views on things. I thought it was an interesting module. The next 3 are based on insect threats to food, stem cell research. I can't remember the other one, but there's 2 of them anyway. Perhaps I'll bring them up at another podcast.
Yeah, go on. Time. Why not? We like not just the biology, but thinking about it too.
Excellent. Well, I hope you enjoyed listening to Survival of the Thickest. I don't know what ending that was. That's poor. I think that shows what today's been.
Yeah. Hope you enjoyed it. We didn't.
I don't know. What do we usually say at the end of these things?
We say thank you for listening. Like, comment, and subscribe.
Oh, yes. And we'll see you next time on Survival of the Thickest.
This is so bad.